Okay, today we're going to start out discussing Rome. First thing you understand about Rome is that Rome is going to be located in the Italian peninsula. Italy is located in Europe. And I want you to take a look at this map real quick. What benefits does Rome have due to its location? I want you to think about geography. So on your note sheet, there should be an area that tells you what to list and what are some of the benefits. I'm going to give you a couple of clues, but I'm going to check it when you get done with your notes today to see what you put. I want you to think about this is where Rome began. It will expand into an empire later, but that's for later in the video. But I want you to think about what is surrounding Rome. What are some opportunities that they may have due to their geographical location? Because this beneath here is Africa, Asia is to the east, and above Italy is the rest of Europe. So I just want you to think about that and jot down 2 to 3 points of what you think they benefit from geographically, okay? When we talk about Roman history, there's a timeline. There's 3 sectors to Roman history. The Roman Republic, the Roman Empire, and then the Byzantine Empire. And we will discuss why these 3 facets occur in Roman history. But the first thing I want you to do is ask me about the myth of Romulus and Remus. Romulus and Remus were twin boys that were born, and their mother is killed, and the children are sent in a basket down the Po River, which is a river located in Rome, and they are rescued by a she-wolf, which is like a lady wolf, and the she-wolf raises Romulus and Remus as her own children, and what will happen is that these boys will fight and struggle for power, and they are quote-unquote the legendary founders of Rome, and what will happen is that Romulus will ultimately kill Remus, okay? It's very similar to the biblical story of Cain and Abel in the Bible, and also it has some similarities to Moses, which kind of what you want to think about is that all of these stories or moral stories are very similar because they arise in areas that are very close in geography to each other. When we discuss Rome, the classical era of Rome, remember classic is something that, you know, classic shoes, classic cars, classic music, it's something that those traits carry on even if the empire or the classical music group does not exist anymore. So the classical era includes the Republic and the Empire. One thing we're going to discuss today is also Julius Caesar. He will be assassinated. And ultimately his son, his adopted son Augustus, will take over as an emperor. He's no longer just, you know, ruling Rome. He's an emperor of this whole empire that Rome has taken over. They'll take over areas in Africa, Asia, and Europe as well. And so he'll move the shift from republic, or move it from, republic to an empire. When we discuss a republic, and you need to make sure this is in your notes, a republic is going to be a government in which supreme power is held by the people, but they take that power and they elect their representatives, which means instead of them all going to sit down and discuss the issues, they pick people to represent their group or their population. We have traits of the republic in America. We have a democratic republic. So my question to you is, why would Rome have to use this government style of republic instead of a direct democracy like Athens, Greece? Keep in mind, here are a couple of things, and I want you to answer this on your own, but I'm going to give you a couple of things to think about, stew on while you talk about it or write about it. Athens was a smaller city-state in Greece, okay? Rome is going to become an empire. So when we deal with empires, you have to remember that empires are not just one civilization, but several civilizations. So I would like for you to think about why they chose the republic, where they vote and choose leaders from their area instead of using the direct democracy. Take time to jot this down in your notes. Make sure it's a good, complete thought for me, please. The next thing I want you to look at is that this is the Roman Empire at its height. So as you can see, it spans over areas of Europe. Okay, and here's Italy. Italy looks like a boot. That's how you can always find it. There's Rome, the original city, but then it expands out. Asia Minor, which this later will be Turkey. Judea, which is going to deal with Abraham and people who are practicing Judaism. We haven't discussed that fully yet, but also we have Egypt. and the rest of northern Africa up here that belonged to the Roman Empire at its height. So this is all of the areas, even up to England, which is called Britannica, Britannia at this time, are ruled by Rome. That's why it's created into an empire. When we talk about Roman civilization, you have to understand that the Romans are big on jocking everybody's steez. And what I mean by that is that they like to take everybody's ideas and blend it into their culture. They're the ultimate copycats. So what you have to understand is that they are patterned like Greece. They, because they had such a large influence, because their empire was so vast, they influenced most of Europe, Southwest Asia, and North Africa, which is what you just saw on the map before. I'll give you an example. When we discuss Roman civilizations, Romans took the Greek gods and renamed those jokers, and they still had the same belief or capability. Like, if you look on the left, there's a Greek god named Zeus. Okay, if you look on the right, there's the Roman god named Jupiter. Same dude, different names. Okay, still like the god of lightning and the god of all gods. Okay, but they just changed the names, and they're like, oh, it's different. Okay, even some of their clothing, writing, their style of like literature, some of those things are similar to the Greeks. Rome. One thing that Rome had is that Rome is going to rise and take over Greece as soon as like Alexander dies, because remember Alexander had created the Hellenistic empire, Hellenistic culture, and as soon as he dies, his empire doesn't fare very well without his leadership. And so what he does, after his death, the Romans take over Greece. Now, the Greeks, as well as the Etruscans and the Latins, used to live in Italy, in the Roman area before the Romans arose. But they're going to take 3 aspects of Greek culture, which will be architecture, philosophy, and literature. I'll give you an example. Like Greek pillars, Ionic, Doric, and Corinthian are adopted by the Romans. Also archways, things like that. Philosophy, they will read writings of Socrates, Plato, and Aristotle and adopt that into their culture, as well as literature like the Aeneid by Virgil. Virgil is very similar to Homer in his writings. Like, he writes the Aeneid, which is a story, and it's an epic poem that is similar to the Odyssey and the Iliad, which were written by Homer, who was a Greek writer. When we discuss Roman architecture, and I don't know why this is not centered, you're going to have some things like monuments, political and military leaders, like have statues, temples for worship. They're going to have gods and goddesses, which means they were polytheistic in their beliefs, very similar to the Greeks. Aqueducts, which bring fresh water to every city. Fast networks of roads. If you hear the saying, all roads lead to Rome, it's because the Romans were big on roads, because roads offered travel for trade and things like that. What you need to understand as well is that they're not the originator of street grids, but they are very popular with their beaten roads, their roads that have a certain path. When we talked about ancient India, they had roads as well, or street grids. These roads were used to move troops quickly if there was an invasion or a war, and also aided in trade. And the spreading of Christianity will follow the same path of trade and the roads throughout Rome. We're going to look at some pictures of some architecture. You have some aqueducts, the arches there. If you look here, you can see pillars, which are something that were taken from ancient Greece. More archways, that's like their thing. You see these pillars are very similar. And there's the Colosseum. Beautiful, okay? The next thing we're going to talk about is Roman government. If a problem couldn't be fixed by the military, then it definitely couldn't be fixed. And when we say that, it's in relation to the fact that the Roman government was a militaristic government, okay? Very similar to Sparta. They had legionaries, which were like individuals who were engineers, builders, and laborers in Rome. They used the military to protect their borders, because when you do not protect a border, it's vulnerable to invasion, as well as they use the military to expand trade by land or by sea. As you can see, the Italian peninsula sticks out into the Mediterranean Sea, which offers Rome the ability to trade with Africa and Asia, as well as the rest of Europe. They built military forces throughout the empire. So as Rome expands, they take over different areas that are not necessarily Roman, but they will be Roman because they are now part of the empire. And what I mean by that is that they will say, hey, you can still keep your military, but you are under Rome. So that means you belong to our empire. So we will fight with you and you will fight for us. They had diplomats, which are people who advocate and mediate between groups and civilizations. And also they had merchants who worked with treaties, like when you had to draft a treaty or an agreement, and also with trade. Another thing that they had is that they had silk. Silk is a hot commodity during this time. It is like the bee's knees. It's like the Jordans, the Gucci, the Louis Vuitton of the time, because it was made by silkworms, which were... they are worms, and they produce silk, which is a fiber that creates fabrics that people could wear. But it was the hot commodity during this time. Another thing when we talk about Roman civilization is that Romans were encouraged to have migration to the colonies to encourage natives to embrace the Roman way. Let me explain that a little further. When Rome would take over an area, I'll give you an example. They're going to take over Britannia, okay? When they take over areas like Gaul in Europe, they are going to encourage people who are from the original Roman area to move there to help the newly adopted people into the empire fall into the Roman way. And when I say the Roman way, what you need to understand, first of all, migration is the movement of people from one region to another, okay? The second thing is the Roman way is the ideal way of living during this time. Rome was the standard, most common to like civilization, because they were the largest empire. So when in Rome, do as the Romans do, okay? You've probably heard that saying before. And so what they're saying is, when we take you over and you're part of our empire, we would like for you to do things a little similar to us. You can still maintain some of your culture, but when in Rome, do as the Romans do. And another thing, many people in Europe and Africa were considered Roman, but I want you to think about this. Even though Rome, had taken over most areas of Europe and Africa, just because they had taken over those areas did not mean that those people from those areas actually got to see Rome. And so they were considered Roman, but they had never seen the cities of Rome or the areas of Rome, and they, built their provinces and their areas to model after Rome, because that was the Roman way. Make sure that you're caught up on your notes. Make sure that you've answered all your questions in your EduCanon. If you have any questions, please let Miss Cannon know.